Rick had walked for hours under the scorching twin suns of Veronine, the desert world that spread endlessly around him like a golden ocean. His boots sank into the shifting sands with every step, the wind whipping small grains against his face. He squinted, shielding his eyes with a leather-gloved hand, and scanned the horizon. The ruins of an ancient city, shattered towers and crumbling walls, jutted out of the sand like jagged teeth. Somewhere among those ruins, he had heard rumors of movement, of a small creature wandering alone. Rick wasn't sure what he would find, but his instincts had never failed him before. He had been a scavenger all his life, surviving where others could not. He had faced sandstorms, rogue scavenger gangs, and desert predators the size of small buildings. Yet nothing had prepared him for what he saw now, a small, fragile figure stumbling through the dunes, glowing faintly under the light of the setting suns. The figure was tiny, smaller than a human child, with thin limbs and a pale, almost translucent skin. Along its shoulders and arms ran strange bioluminescent markings, pulsing softly in colors that shifted like water under sunlight. Its eyes were large and round, shimmering silver, and filled with confusion and fear. Rick's heart clenched. The child, if it was a child, looked lost, terrified, and alone. He approached cautiously, hands held out to show he meant no harm. "Hey there," he called softly. "It's okay. You're safe." The child froze, then took a step back, trembling. It made a soft whistling sound, almost like a hiss. Its glowing markings flickered rapidly, a clear sign of distress. Rick crouched, keeping himself low and calm. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I can help. Just come with me." The desert wind carried his words, and for a moment, the child hesitated. Then, with a tiny squeak, it ran forward, straight into his arms, wrapping its small, delicate arms around his neck. Rick carefully lifted it, cradling it close, feeling the warmth of its tiny body. It was lighter than any human child, almost like holding a fragile piece of glass dot as he held the child. Rick felt a strange energy radiating from it, a quiet, pulsing power that seemed to hum under his skin. He had no idea what it was, but he knew one thing. This child was special, and dangerous in the wrong hands. Rick tightened his grip and looked out at the desert. The ruins were still far ahead, and the shadows were lengthening. But there was only one person he knew who could keep this child safe. The Huntress. No one knew her real name. She was a legend whispered about in the settlements scattered across Veronine. Some said she was faster than any predator, smarter than any hunter, and more dangerous than a desert storm. She protected the lost and the weak, but she trusted no one, not even humans. Rick knew she would not welcome him, but he had to try. He began the long trek across the dunes, the child clinging tightly to his chest. The sun sank lower, and the desert turned a deep orange, painting everything in molten gold. The wind picked up, carrying sand that stung his face and made his eyes water. Still, he pressed on. Hours passed, and the desert grew colder. Night fell suddenly, as if the suns had been snatched from the sky. The temperature dropped sharply, and Rick wrapped the child in his cloak, trying to keep it warm. Then he heard it, a low growl coming from the shadows. He froze, listening. The desert at night was alive with dangers. Predators prowled the dunes, creatures that could sniff out warmth, movement, or fear. Rick's hand went to the small pulse blade at his belt, a simple tool he used to protect himself. The growl grew louder, and glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. 2, then 4. The predators were fast and sleek, their bodies adapted perfectly to the desert night. Rick took a deep breath. He had faced sand predators before. He knew their habits. He whispered to the child, "Stay still. Don't make a sound." The child's silver eyes widened, but it obeyed, huddling closer. The predators circled, eyes gleaming. Rick calculated his moves carefully. With a swift motion, he triggered a small flare from his pack, blinding the nearest predator. It hissed and leapt back, giving him a chance to sprint toward a nearby ridge. He didn't look back, keeping the child close. His muscles burning with exertion. By dawn, Rick had found shelter among some ruins. He collapsed against a broken wall, exhausted, the child still clinging to him. For a moment, he closed his eyes, letting himself rest. But even as he breathed in the morning air, he knew the dangers weren't over. He had to reach the Huntress before anyone or anything found the child. The journey resumed with the rising suns. The desert stretched endlessly, the ruins sparse and scattered. Rick navigated by memory, following paths only someone who had lived here for years could know. The child grew quiet, occasionally whispering in its strange language, which sounded like musical notes and faint hisses. Rick didn't understand, but he felt the emotion behind the sounds: fear, confusion, and perhaps trust. After another long day, the faint outline of a hidden canyon appeared ahead. The Huntress's camp was rumored to be there, concealed by cliffs and mist. Rick's heart raced. They were close. Suddenly, he heard movement above, a glint of metal reflecting the suns. Rogues, scavengers, they had been tracking him. Rick didn't have time to think. He ran, ducking into narrow paths, using his knowledge of the terrain to stay one step ahead. The child squealed once as they dodged a falling rock, and Rick's grip tightened. Finally, as the suns began to set again, he reached the canyon. Mist swirled around the cliffs, and there, in a small clearing, he saw her, the Huntress. She stood tall and silent, her armor sleek and dark, blending perfectly with the shadows. Her eyes glimmered with a sharp intelligence, and her posture was all power and readiness. Rick approached cautiously. "I brought him," he said, holding out the child. "He's safe." Before he could finish, the Huntress moved like lightning. She reached forward, snatched the child from his arms, and hissed sharply, "Your scent's on him, idiot." Rick staggered back, stunned. The child clung to her instinctively, shivering, and she held it close as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, bore into him. I only wanted to keep him safe," Rick said, frustration and fear mingling in his voice. Kelleth, the Huntress, did not respond. She turned, scanning the horizon for any threat, her posture tense. Then she hissed again, a warning to the desert, to the rogues, to anyone who might dare approach. Rick watched helplessly as she assessed him. He realized in that moment that the Huntress did not trust easily. She did not forgive easily. And humans, especially ones with scent traces on her wards, were not welcome. Yet he could not give up. The child needed protection, and he had promised. His resolve hardened. He would find a way to prove himself, even if it meant facing the Huntress's wrath or surviving the desert's deadly challenges alone. As the suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon, Rick made his choice. He would follow her rules, endure her tests, and do whatever it took to ensure the child's safety. The desert was vast and merciless, but so was his determination. For the first time in his life, Rick felt that he was not just surviving for the child. He could fight, endure, and maybe even become something greater than himself. And somewhere in the misted canyon, the Huntress watched, silent and sharp, ready to test the human who dared to challenge her trust. The desert night fell, alive with danger, mystery, and the first fragile sparks of an alliance that might change the fate of all who lived on Vera-9. The night in the canyon was dark and silent, except for the soft hissing of the desert winds. Rick sat a short distance from the Huntress's camp, his back against a jagged rock, watching as Kelleth held the child close. The little one's bioluminescent. Markings glowed softly, shifting colors as if reflecting her moods. Rick tried to speak, but the words felt small and useless. The Huntress did not turn, her sharp silver eyes scanning the darkness, alert for even the faintest hint of danger. He knew she did not trust him, and for good reason. His scent was on. The child, a mark of human presence that could attract predators or enemies. Finally, Calla spoke, her voice low and firm, like the hiss of a predator ready to strike. "Humans are careless," she said. "They leave traces. They bring danger. Why should I let you near him?" Rick swallowed. "I didn't mean any harm. I only wanted to help." Calla's eyes narrowed. "Help? You have no idea what this child is. You do not understand what you are carrying. Humans cannot comprehend the consequences." Rick looked at the child, whose small hands clutched at Calith's armor. Its silver eyes flickered toward him for just a moment, and he felt a spark of hope. The child did not reject him entirely. There was a bond, faint but real. Calla sighed almost softly, though her posture did not change. "If you wish to prove yourself, you must endure a test. One night in the desert, alone. No weapons except your wits. Survive, and you may speak to him again." Rick blinked, taken aback. "Alone? In the desert?" "The desert is honest," Calith replied. "It does not forgive mistakes. You will face what you do not know. You will learn quickly." She gestured toward the shadowed expanse of sand beyond the canyon. "Go. I will watch from here. Survive or return in ashes." The weight of her words pressed on Rick. This was no ordinary test. The desert was filled with dangerous sand predators that could track by warmth, rogue scavenger gangs, sudden storms that could strip flesh from bone, and even hidden ruins with traps left by ancient civilizations. Yet he did not hesitate. The child's safety was more important than his fear. Rick adjusted his cloak, secured his small pack, and stepped into the shadows. The desert stretched endlessly before him, vast and unbroken. Every step was a gamble, every movement a calculation. He remembered what he had learned as a scavenger. The desert punished carelessness, but rewarded knowledge and intuition. Hours passed. The night grew colder, the air sharp and biting. Rick crouched behind a ridge, listening. Somewhere far off, a low growl echoed. Sand predators. He carefully examined his surroundings, spotting the faint outline of sleek bodies moving under the moonlight. Their eyes glimmered like molten silver. Rick's pulse quickened, but he did not panic. He had survived predators before. He found a narrow crevice in the rocks and slipped inside, holding his breath as the creatures passed. The child's bioluminescent glow flickered faintly in his pocket, a reminder of why he could not fail. As he continued, the desert seemed alive with whispers. Small insects, native to Veronine, scuttled across the sand, making strange clicking noises. Rocks shifted under his boots, and the wind carried distant, eerie howls. Rick felt every instinct in his body alert, every sense heightened. He had become more than a scavenger tonight. He was a protector, a guardian. Then came the first real challenge, a sudden drop in temperature, far colder than expected. The night sky above him was clear, stars glimmering, but the air itself seemed to sting. He wrapped his cloak tighter and pressed forward, teeth chattering. Then he spotted it, a small oasis, hidden in the dunes, water still and calm, but it was not safe. The reflection of the moon revealed the shapes of predators circling, waiting. Rick's mind raced. He could wait for them to move, but time was precious. He scanned the area, spotting a fallen tree trunk nearby. With careful, silent movements, he climbed atop it, using it as a bridge to water without touching the sand directly. The predators hissed in frustration as he moved, but they could not reach him. He reached the water and drank quickly, filling a small canteen. Every moment in the desert was a battle, and Rick had learned to fight with strategy, not just strength. He paused for a breath, glancing up at the stars. Somewhere, Keleth watched. He could feel her eyes on him, judging every move, every decision. Suddenly, the wind shifted, carrying a new scent. Rick froze. It was not sand, not predator, it was another human. A scavenger gang, no doubt tracking him and the child. They had followed him from the canyon. Rick's heart pounded. He had to act fast. He spotted a narrow canyon path leading up a ridge. Using the terrain to his advantage, he moved silently, keeping low. The scavengers were less familiar with the land, slower and clumsier. He led them into a trap, a collapsed rock wall that created a narrow corridor. The gang had no choice but to follow, and one by one, they became stuck, unable to proceed. Rick slipped past them, moving like a shadow across the dune's dot as dawn approached. Exhaustion weighed on him. His muscles burned, his throat was dry, and his mind raced. Yet he pressed on. The desert had become a test of both body and spirit, and Rick was determined to survive. Meanwhile, in the canyon, Keleth kept watch. She observed his movements through her keen eyes, noting every detail. Humans were unpredictable. And this human was showing qualities rare even among her own kind: ingenuity, courage, and care. She did not trust easily, but even she could not ignore the signs of potential doubt by midday. Rick found a small plateau with a view of the canyon. The child's safety was still foremost in his mind, though it was far away now in Keleth's arms. He considered returning, but he knew the Huntress's test was not just survival. It was learning to endure, to overcome, and to think beyond instinct. He settled in the shade of a rock formation, eating small rations, and rested briefly. But the desert did not allow long rests. From the horizon, a sandstorm approached, fast and violent, sweeping across the dunes like a living force. Rick's instinct screamed. He grabbed a large rock overhang and held on as the storm hit. Sand lashed at his face, filling his mouth and eyes. The wind threatened to throw him off balance, but he endured, covering himself and keeping the child's image in his mind as a reason to survive. Hours passed, the storm raging and then fading. Rick emerged, covered in sand and sweat, but alive. His determination had not wavered. He felt a strange connection to the desert now, a sense of respect for its unforgiving power. The test was shaping him, molding him into something more than a simple scavenger dot by evening. He spotted the canyon once more. The familiar shapes of Keleth's camp were visible in the distance. He approached cautiously, every step measured. As he neared, he saw her waiting, silent and sharp. The child's bioluminescent markings glowed faintly, flickering in response to Rick's presence. Keleth hissed softly, not in anger, but as a signal. "You have survived," she said. Her voice was calm, almost approving. "Few humans last even one night in this desert, and you have endured more than most. Yet endurance alone does not grant trust. You must understand what you carry." Rick nodded, breathing heavily, exhaustion clear on his face. "I will do whatever it takes. I only want to protect him." Keleth studied him for a long moment, her sharp eyes scanning his every movement, noting his resolve, his caution, and his care. Finally, she spoke again. "Then you will learn. The child is not ordinary. He carries a gift, a rare genetic trait that can influence the world in ways humans cannot fully understand. That is why he must be protected. That is why you must prove yourself, not just in survival, but in wisdom, in judgment, and in restraint." Rick's heart raced. The stakes were higher than he had imagined. This was not simply a test of endurance. It was a test of character, of understanding, of the ability to act with intelligence and compassion in a world that often demanded brutality. Keleth extended her hand. "Follow me. The desert has more lessons to teach, and the Huntress does not waste time. If you fail, the child may never forgive you, and neither will I." Rick took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to continue the journey. The desert, dangerous and beautiful, had already tested him in ways he could never have imagined. But he had survived. And now, under the watchful eye of the Huntress, he would learn what it truly meant to protect the lost, to rise above fear, and to prove that humans could be more than ordinary. The canyon echoed with the wind, the distant cries of predators, and the soft glow of the child's markings. A new chapter was beginning, one that would push Rick beyond the limits of body, mind, and courage. And Keleth, the silent Huntress, would see whether this human was worthy or foolish. The desert stretched on, harsh and unyielding, but Rick walked forward, carrying hope, determination, and the promise of protection. The test was not over. It had only just begun. The desert sun rose over the jagged canyon, turning the sand into rivers of molten gold. Keleth, the Huntress, stood atop a ridge, her eyes scanning the horizon with a predator's focus. The child clung to her, small hands wrapped around her armor, its markings glowing faintly in response to the light. Keleth sensed something unusual in the air. There was a shift, subtle but undeniable, a disturbance that rippled through the desert winds. It was the scent of outsiders, and they were coming with intent. She hissed softly, alerting the child to stay close. Far below, Rick trudged across the dunes, still weary from the previous night's test but sharpened by survival. Every muscle ached, but his determination burned brighter than ever. He had survived predators, storms, and treacherous terrain. Now, he had to prove that he could act with precision and courage when the stakes were highest. Keleth had taught him some of the canyon's secrets. Narrow paths, hidden ledges, and subtle shifts in the wind were tools he could use. Rick had learned quickly. He now moved with a purpose, understanding that survival was more than avoiding danger. It was predicting it, shaping it, and turning it to advantage. The first sign of the threat came as a distant shimmer on the horizon. Sand and dust swirled unnaturally, forming shapes too structured to be near wind. Rick squinted. Human scavengers? No, these were something else. Sleek black armored ships hovered just above the dunes. Figures moved with disciplined precision, their technology far beyond anything Rick had encountered. "They found us," he muttered under his breath, gripping the pulse blade at his side. He could feel the child's faint aura pulsing against his chest, a warning, almost instinctive. Keleth had already noticed the approaching force. From her ridge, she traced their movements. These were not ordinary raiders. They were mercenaries, hired by unknown factions who sought the child's rare abilities. The child's genetic trait could manipulate energy flows in subtle, profound ways, affecting ecosystems and even planetary systems. That was why it was so valuable and so dangerous. Keleth hissed again and moved with lightning speed. She descended the ridge, silent and precise, positioning herself between the incoming threat and the canyon. Rick followed, careful to stay within her protective shadow. The desert had tested his strength, but now it would test his courage. The mercenaries opened fire, energy blasts cutting across the dunes, striking rocks and sending sparks into the air. Keleth moved like a shadow, her agility unmatched. Rick ducked behind a fallen pillar of stone, firing a pulse flare to distract one of the attackers. The human ingenuity Keleth had observed during his test now became an asset in combat. One of the mercenaries spotted Rick and advanced. But Rick was ready. He led the figure into a narrow crevice where it could not maneuver its heavy armor. With quick thinking, he toppled a loose rock formation, trapping the mercenary without harming it, showing both intelligence and restraint. Keleth noticed. She allowed herself a rare nod, recognizing the human's resourcefulness. "Good," she hissed. "But one act does not win battles. You must anticipate, adapt, and survive under fire." Rick's heart pounded. The child whimpered softly in Caleth's arms, sensing the danger. Its markings pulsed rapidly, a mixture of fear and latent power. Rick focused, realizing that the child's abilities might influence the battlefield in subtle ways, even if he could not yet comprehend how. As the mercenaries pushed closer, Caleth sprang into action. She moved like wind, a blur of motion, striking with precision. Each attack was calculated, each step measured. Rick followed, providing support, guiding her where necessary, and using his knowledge of the terrain to create obstacles for the attackers. A group of mercenaries attempted to flank them through a hidden canyon path. Rick anticipated the movement and set a small trap, a simple device of rocks and tension lines that sent the attackers sprawling into the sand. The combination of human cleverness and Caleth's lethal precision began to turn the tide. Despite their efforts, the attackers were relentless. They adapted quickly, using hover vehicles to sweep across the dunes, firing coordinated energy bursts. Rick ducked behind a rock, his pulse blade sparking as he deflected a blast aimed at Caleth. She hissed sharply, moving to protect him. "You are learning," she said, her voice low but approving. "Not fast enough, but you are learning." Rick gritted his teeth, determination fueling him. The desert had tested him before, but now it tested his mind and reflexes as much as his endurance. He moved with purpose, guiding mercenaries into traps, disarming them without killing, and predicting their next moves. The child, sensing the tension, pulsed brighter than ever. Rick realized it was reacting to danger, almost like a compass for threat. He used this instinct to anticipate ambushes, moving Caleth and himself into safer positions. The synergy was unspoken but effective. Human ingenuity paired with the Huntress's precision. Hours passed. The sun dipped low, turning the desert into a fiery sea. The mercenaries regrouped, using heavier equipment now, trying to overwhelm them with brute force. Caleth leapt from rock to rock, striking with speed and skill, while Rick guided debris and rocks to block their path, creating a dynamic battlefield shaped by both skill and strategy. At one point, a massive hover vehicle attempted to crush their position. Rick saw the danger and acted immediately. He triggered a small energy flare, reflecting it off a shard of metal toward the vehicle's sensor. The mercenary inside panicked, losing control and crashing into the sand. Caleth struck simultaneously, taking down attackers with precision, her movements a deadly dance of efficiency. The tide was turning. The mercenaries, skilled but unprepared for the combined human-huntress tactics, began to falter. Rick noticed exhaustion in their movements, hesitation in their attacks. Caleth hissed and signaled the final push. Together, they advanced, moving as one Caleth with unmatched skill, Rick with clever improvisation, and the child pulsing guidance subtly from her arms. Finally, the last of the mercenaries fled, realizing the battle was lost. The desert returned to its quiet, harsh silence. Caleth stood, breathing lightly, the child still clinging to her. She glanced at Rick, who was covered in sand, sweat, and small cuts, but alive. "You survived," she said, her voice calm, almost soft. "But survival alone does not grant trust. You have begun to prove yourself, but you must understand the weight of what you carry." Rick nodded, exhausted but proud. "I will learn. I want to protect him. I want to help." Caleth studied him for a long moment, her silver eyes sharp and calculating. "Humans are unpredictable," she said finally. "Some bring destruction. Some bring hope. You may bring hope, but that is not yet certain. You must continue to prove yourself." The child, sensing calm and safety, pulsed softly, a gentle glow now. Its bioluminescence reflected both trust and recognition. Rick felt a warm surge of relief. He had survived the desert, survived predators, survived mercenaries, and now He had taken the first step toward earning Caleth's trust. Caleth turned toward the horizon. The desert teaches many lessons, Rick. Today, you have learned courage. Tomorrow, you will learn patience. And after that, you may learn wisdom. Only then will the child be truly safe. Rick watched her, feeling the weight of the desert, the child's importance, and his own limitations. He had survived, but the journey was far from over. The desert was vast, and beyond it lay dangers he had not yet imagined: alien factions, unpredictable creatures, and the mysteries of the child's rare abilities. Yet he felt something he had not felt before: purpose. The desert had shaped him, tested him, and now it had given him a reason to rise beyond survival. He was no longer just a scavenger wandering the dunes. He was a protector, an ally, and perhaps one day a true companion to the Huntress and the child Dodd as the sun set, casting long shadows across the canyon. Caleth hissed softly, a rare sound of acknowledgement. "Come," she said. "Rest for now. But know this, the desert does not forgive the complacent. Tomorrow, the lessons continue." Rick followed, his steps weary but steady. The child nestled in Caleth's arms pulsed softly in response, a subtle rhythm that seemed to say, "You are not alone. And together we may endure whatever comes next." The desert night fell once more, vast and unforgiving. But within its sands, a new alliance had begun: human ingenuity and determination, paired with the skill and wisdom of the Huntress, ready to face whatever the universe could throw at them. And somewhere in the shifting dunes, distant eyes watched, noting the bond forming between them: the human who survived, the Huntress who guarded, and the child who held the key to powers beyond imagination. The desert had been conquered for now, but the journey was far from over. The canyon was quiet, but the tension in the air was thick. Caleth, the Huntress, stood with the child in her arms, her silver eyes scanning the distant horizon. Rick, still worn from the desert and the mercenary siege, stood beside her. He had survived the desert, faced danger, and begun earning her respect. But Caleth's trust was not yet complete. A faint shimmer appeared far above the dune's alien ships this time, unlike the mercenaries they had faced before. Sleek, metallic, and silent, they glided over the desert like predators. Caleth hissed sharply, signaling to Rick, "They are not ordinary. Their technology is advanced, their purpose clear. They want the child." Rick felt a surge of determination. He had survived storms, predators, and human enemies, but these were different. These alien factions would not hesitate to harm the child. He clenched his fists and glanced at the glowing markings, pulsing in anticipation. "Then we fight," he said. Caleth studied him for a moment. "Yes, but you fight with your mind as much as your strength. Watch, listen, and act. Together, we may succeed." The alien ships descended closer, sending a ripple of energy across the desert. The ground vibrated beneath them. Caleth moved first, a blur of motion, darting across the rocks, her armor shimmering in the fading sunlight. Rick followed, staying close but alert, using every lesson he had learned from the desert to anticipate threats and create advantages. The first wave of alien drones dropped from the ships, sleek machines with spinning energy blades. They moved quickly, scanning the area for the child. Caleth struck first, leaping onto a rocky ledge and striking with precision. Each movement was a calculated attack, designed to incapacitate without unnecessary risk. Rick used rocks and debris to block drone paths, luring them into traps he had improvised. The child's markings pulsed brightly, reacting to the energy around them. Rick realized the child could influence the environment in subtle ways, shifting sand, affecting energy flows, and even disrupting the alien technology. He shouted to Caleth, "The child can help. We just need to guide it." Caleth nodded. Then we will. But carefully. Overuse of its power could be dangerous. Rick focused, learning to sense the child's subtle pulses. He directed energy bursts from the drones toward certain rocks, creating chain reactions that disabled the machines. The synergy between human ingenuity, Huntress skill, and the child's latent abilities began to turn the battle. A large alien combat unit landed nearby, its energy cannons glowing ominously. Caliph hissed sharply, moving between the child and the machine. "Stay close," she warned Rick. Rick's mind raced. He couldn't match the firepower, but he could outthink it. He led the unit toward a narrow canyon pass. Its size and momentum worked against it as it tried to navigate the tight space. Rick triggered a small series of rock slides, trapping the unit momentarily and allowing Caliph to strike with precise energy strikes. The battle raged on, the desert alive with movement, light, and energy. Dust swirled around them, and the air crackled with tension. Rick's muscles burned, but he did not stop. Every decision mattered. Every step could mean success or disaster. Finally, the alien commander appeared, a humanoid figure in advanced armor, wielding a powerful energy staff. Its eyes glowed red, scanning for the child. Caliph hissed, her stance ready. "This one is dangerous," she said. "Stay behind me, human. Follow my lead." Rick nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The commander advanced, striking with incredible speed. Caliph dodged and countered, her movements a deadly dance. Rick followed, creating distractions and using the environment to impede the commander's attacks. The child pulsed brighter, sensing the danger, and a subtle wave of energy surged, causing the commander to falter. Seizing the opportunity, Caliph struck decisively, knocking the commander back. Rick moved quickly, blocking its retreat path. Together, they forced the alien to retreat, the remaining drones following its orders. The desert fell quiet once more. Caliph exhaled, holding the child close. "You have done well," she said, her voice low but firm. "You fought with courage, intelligence, and care. Today, you have proven that humans can rise to meet extraordinary challenges." Rick, still breathing heavily, nodded. "I only want to protect them. That's all." Caliph's eyes softened slightly, a rare moment of acknowledgement. "Then, you are learning the first lesson of the Huntress. Protection requires more than strength. It requires wisdom, patience, and the ability to act when it matters most." The child looked up at Rick, its silver eyes shimmering, and reached toward him. He knelt, extending a hand, and for the first time, the child accepted it. Its glow pulsed gently, a sign of trust and recognition. Caliph observed silently, noting the bond forming. "The child recognizes your spirit," she said. "But know this, the universe is vast, and many will come to seek what is not theirs. We must remain vigilant. You are now part of this responsibility." Rick's chest swelled with resolve. He had come to the desert as a simple scavenger, but he would leave as something more, a protector, an ally, a human worthy of trust. He glanced at the child, feeling a connection deeper than he had ever experienced. The desert stretched endlessly, golden and harsh, but it no longer felt empty or indifferent. Together, they have faced predators, storms, mercenaries, and alien factions. Together, they had survived. And together, they would continue to face whatever challenges awaited. Caliph turned toward the horizon. "We move at dawn," she said. "The desert is unforgiving, but it also teaches strength. Rest tonight. Tomorrow the next stage begins. You must be ready." Rick nodded. "I'll be ready." The night settled over the canyon, calm for the first time in days. The child's markings pulsed softly, reflecting the quiet trust that now existed between the three of them. Caliph watched the stars, silent and alert, her mind always calculating. Rick sat nearby, exhausted but alert. Understanding that vigilance was as important as courage, the desert had changed him. He had learned that humans, when faced with impossible odds, could rise above fear and limitation. He had learned that intellect, creativity, and empathy were as powerful as any weapon. And he had learned that trust, once earned, could bridge even the greatest divides. As the first light of dawn touched the canyon, Caliph prepared to move. Rick adjusted his cloak and prepared himself, ready to follow her lead. The child nestled between them, a symbol of hope, power, and responsibility. Together, they would journey through the desert, facing dangers and mysteries yet unknown. Together, they would protect what was precious, using courage, skill, and intelligence. And together, they would prove that humans, even when underestimated, could rise to the heights of heroism. Caliph glanced at Rick one last time before they began their trek. "Remember this," she said. "The desert tests all who enter it. It will test you again. But you are no longer alone. You have shown that humans, when guided by care and purpose, can become more than they ever imagined." Rick nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. "I understand," he said, "and I'll protect him no matter what comes." The child glowed softly, reaching out to touch his hand. Rick felt a spark of connection, a bond forged through trials, danger, and mutual trust. The desert winds whispered around them, carrying the promise of challenges ahead and the assurance that together they could face them all. The horizon stretched endlessly, golden and beautiful. The desert, once a place of harsh trials, had become a proving ground, a place where courage, intellect, and heart could shine. And within its vastness, a new alliance had formed: the human, the Huntress, and the child with powers beyond imagination. The suns rose higher, casting long shadows across the dunes. Caliph led the way, silent and swift. Rick followed, steady and vigilant. And the child, the reason for their courage, pulsed softly with light, a beacon in the desert. Their journey had only just begun. But together, they would face every danger, overcome every challenge, and prove that even in a vast and different universe, the light of courage, ingenuity, and care could shine brighter than the harshest suns. The desert wind carried their story forward, a tale of human resilience, trust, and heroism. And as they moved through the golden dunes, one truth became clear: humans, when united with purpose and heart, could rise to legendary heights, protecting the lost, the weak, and the extraordinary against all odds.